The first thing I heard was a voice. Not my father's hands on my shoulder. Not my name spoken gently into a dark room. Not the particular sound of someone who loves you and has been frightened and is now relieved. Just a voice. Flat and certain, the way a voice sounds when it has already finished considering the question. Let her go! I did not hear it in the moment it was said. I was unconscious when my father spoke those words, machines breathing for me, 4 ribs fractured, my brain swelling against the inside of my skull in a hospital where I had worked for 6 years. I knew that building. I knew the smell of it, the particular blue-white light of the ICU, the sound the monitors made when a patient's rhythm shifted. I had stood at 100 bedsides in that light and read the numbers and known what they meant. I lay in one of those beds for 3 weeks without knowing any of this was happening. What I know now, I learned afterward from a time-stamped incident report, from a nurse who did not look away, from a lawyer my grandmother had hired 2 years before her death, because she understood something about her son-in-law that I had spent my entire life pretending not to see. My name is Wendy Thomas. I am 29 years old. I am a registered nurse. And until the morning I opened my eyes in room 14 of the St. Catherine's ICU, I had spent my entire life believing that the debt my father said I owed him was real. The accident happened on a Tuesday in March at 4:17 in the morning. I had worked a 12-hour overnight shift. I remember the drive, the light rain on Route 202, the traffic signals blurred in the wet asphalt, the particular arithmetic of calculating sleep. 6 hours if I skipped breakfast, 5 if I showered. I remember the dashboard clock. I remember thinking I should have taken the longer route with less traffic. I do not remember the pickup truck running the red light. I do not remember the sound of the impact, or the glass, or the 90 seconds the paramedic said I remained conscious, long enough to whisper my name to the first responder who reached me through the driver's side window. Then nothing. Brain swelling, 4 broken ribs, internal bleeding. The ER team at St. Catherine's operated within the hour, but the first surgery was not enough. They needed a second one, a more extensive procedure, a longer timeline, a more uncertain outcome. Someone had to authorize it. I was not married. No children. My emergency contact listed since I turned 18 was a name I had never thought to change. Gerald Thomas. Father, next of kin. They called him at 10:30 that night. He arrived at the hospital at 10:47. He did not go to my room. To understand what my father did that night, you have to understand what he had been doing for 25 years. I was born with a hole in my heart, a ventricular septal defect. That is the medical term for it, the one the cardiologist used when I was 4 years old, and my parents sat in a consultation room and were told their daughter needed open-heart surgery. The operation lasted 11 hours. I have a scar that runs the length of my sternum, pale now and smooth, the kind of scar that belongs to someone who has been carrying something a long time. I do not remember the surgery. I have no memory of the pain or the recovery or the months that followed. What I remember is the first time my father told me how much I had cost. I was 8 years old. It was a Tuesday in October. I remember because I had a spelling test that morning and I had gotten everything right, and I came home wanting to tell someone, and the kitchen was empty except for my father at the table with a calculator and a manila folder full of papers that I understood, even at 8, were connected to me in some way I had not been told about directly. My sneakers had been splitting along the sole for 3 weeks. Every time it rained, which was often that October, the water came through before I reached school. My socks were wet by first period every rainy day. "Dad," I said, "my shoes are leaking." He did not look up from the calculator. "Do you know how much you cost this family?" I did not know what to say. I was 8. He set his finger on a number on the paper in front of him. $214,000, he said. That's what your heart surgery cost. That's what you cost. He still did not look up. You're not getting new shoes, he said. We'll tape them. I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of my bed. I looked at the spelling test I had been going to show him, and I folded it in half and put it in my desk drawer. I never showed it to him. By 12, I had stopped asking for anything at all. By 15, I was babysitting 3 houses on our block to afford my own notebooks and pencils. Not because my parents could not buy them, because asking had stopped feeling like something I was allowed to do. By 18, I sat alone at a table in the financial aid office of a community college and signed my first student loan without anyone beside me, while my older sister Meredith packed for a state university whose tuition my parents paid in full without discussion. Meredith received a car at 16. I rode the bus. Meredith's birthdays were celebrated at restaurants. I blew out candles on a grocery store cake with a card signed only by my mother. No one in my family ever suggested this was unusual. And the terrible thing, the thing that took me years to understand, is that neither did I believed him. That is what I need you to understand about those years, because without it nothing that comes after makes complete sense. My father did not shout the dead at me. He did not hold it over me in dramatic confrontations. He mentioned it the way you mention the weather, a background fact, a given, a truth so established it required no argument. You cost this family everything. He said it at dinner tables and in car rides, and in the silence of hospital waiting rooms where he sat doing crossword puzzles, while I was at checkups for the heart that had cost them so much. He said it with a kind of patience, the way a teacher repeats a fact to a student who keeps forgetting. Eventually, I stopped forgetting. The sentence carved itself into the architecture of who I believed I was, not as cruelty, but as fact. The way my surgical scar was fact. The way my blood type was fact. The only person who never spoke this way was my grandmother. Lillian Price lived alone in a brick house on Elm Street in Norristown, Pennsylvania. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a porch swing that creaked whenever the wind shifted, a garden in the back that she coaxed to life every spring with the specific devotion of someone who understood that growth requires sustained attention rather than dramatic intervention. She had lived in that house for 41 years. She had raised my mother there, buried my grandfather there. The neighbors knew her name and she knew theirs, and she watered the plants on her porch every morning at 8 regardless of the temperature. When I graduated nursing school at 23, I began visiting her every Saturday, 40 minutes each way. I brought groceries, checked her blood pressure, listened to stories that wandered pleasantly without destination. She asked about my week with the specific attention of someone for whom your answer genuinely mattered. She asked if I had eaten. She asked about the patients I worried about, the shifts that had been difficult, the small victories that no one else in my life thought to inquire about. She never once mentioned what I cost. Near the end, when her voice had grown thin but her eyes remained clear, she said something I filed away without fully understanding. I've taken care of things for you, Wendy. When the time comes, a man named Kesler will find you. I smiled. I assumed the medication was doing its gentle work on her clarity. She was 84. I thought age was stealing her thoughts. I was wrong. My father walked directly from the hospital entrance to the billing department. This is documented. Patricia Walsh, Pat, had been our head nurse for 28 years. She had the specific quality of long-service nurses, the ability to read a room by its sounds before she entered it, to know from the quality of silence in a hallway whether someone was getting better or worse. She was at the nurse's station when my father arrived at the floor. She watched him bypass the ICU entirely. She watched him speak to the billing coordinator for 11 minutes. She watched him return to the hallway outside the consultation room where the surgeon was waiting. The second surgery, my father said. What's the estimate? between $180,000 and $240,000 depending on complications. Insurance would help. Not enough. My father did not pause. She doesn't have a healthcare proxy, he said. I'm the decision maker. A beat. Let her go. We won't pay for the surgery. Pat told me later that the surgeon simply stared at him. My father held the eye contact without difficulty. She's been a financial drain her whole life, he said. He signed the do not resuscitate order with a steady hand. Asked the surgeon if there was anything else he needed to sign. Received the answer. Left the building. He did not look through the ICU glass. He never looked toward my room at all. Pat stood at the nurse's station for a moment after he left, her hand tight around the edge of the counter. She did not call after him. She opened my employee file. Every nurse at St. Catherine's completes an emergency packet during onboarding, contacts, allergies, insurance information, healthcare proxy designation. Most staff skip the proxy section. They are young. They are healthy. They are not thinking about what happens when they are the one in the bed. I had not skipped it. 3 years earlier, sitting in the onboarding room on my first day, I had filled in the name of the person I trusted most in the world with my health. Deborah Owens, my best friend from nursing school. The woman who had stayed on the phone with me through 2 overnight shifts when I was certain I would fail my boards. The woman who had driven 4 hours to attend my nursing school graduation when everyone else in my family had a conflict. Pat found the form in under 2 minutes. She called Deborah at 11:14 p.m. Deborah did not ask questions. I'm leaving now, she said. She drove 90 minutes through rain. She arrived at the hospital at 12:58 a.m., still in the clothes she had been sleeping in, her hands shaking as she signed the authorization form the surgeon placed in front of her. She revoked the DNR. She authorized the surgery. She sat in the waiting room alone for 4 hours. My father was home by midnight, believing morning would bring news of my death. Pat filed an incident report that night, every word he had spoken, every timestamp, the false claim about the proxy, the surgeon's account of the conversation. She filed it before her shift ended, before she went home, before she slept. She told me later she had not been certain she would still be employed in the morning. She filed it anyway. What I did not know, what none of us knew in the hours following my surgery, was that my father had not finished. While Deborah sat alone in a waiting room and surgeons worked on my body and Pat wrote her report, my father was at home, awake, already calculating his next move. He knew about the house on Elm Street. He knew his mother-in-law was dead, and the house was empty and empty things, in his experience, invited possession. What he did not know was that my grandmother had anticipated him. 2 years before her death, Lillian Price had walked alone into the office of a private attorney named Donald Kesler and asked for a will that no family lawyer would touch. The terms were unambiguous: the house on Elm Street to Wendy, a trust containing $85,000 to Wendy. No conditions, no shared ownership, nothing that could be negotiated or contested or gradually redirected. The will had already cleared probate. Certified letters had been sent to my address. Returned unopened, my father had intercepted them. Phone calls had been made to my number. A man answered and said I had moved out of state and did not wish to be contacted. My father's voice. Kesler had stopped calling. He had not stopped waiting. I opened my eyes on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks after the crash. Hospital light flooded the room, that sterile blue-white brightness I had worked beneath for 6 years. I knew its quality precisely. I had never imagined seeing it from this angle. My throat burned where the breathing tube had been. Each inhale moved through my ribs like something with edges. Even blinking required a deliberate decision. The first face I saw was not my father's. Pat stood near the window, arms crossed, watching the monitors with the calm attention of someone who had decided not to trust machines entirely. When she saw my eyes open, She did not rush forward. She pulled a chair beside my bed and took my hand with the specific gentleness of someone who understood that the body, after 3 weeks of this, needed to be approached rather than greeted. "You're safe," she said. "There are things I need to tell you, but not yet." My voice came out wrong, scraped, unfamiliar. "How long?" "3 weeks. The surgery went well. You're going to be fine." Fine. Such a specific word for such an imprecise condition. I drifted in and out of a state that was not sleep, more like floating just beneath the surface of full consciousness, where memories arrived without invitation. Rain on a dashboard, a traffic light, the arithmetic of sleep hours, then nothing. My father came the following afternoon. I know the exact time because I checked the visitor log later, 2:17 p.m. He stood in the doorway for a fraction of a second before his expression arranged itself. In that fraction, less than a heartbeat, something moved across his face that was not relief, something closer to alarm. Then grief arrived, performed with the fluency of someone who had rehearsed it. He rushed forward. His eyes were wet. His voice cracked precisely where a voice should crack. "Oh, sweetheart, we were so scared. Thank God you're okay." He kissed my forehead. He sat beside me. He held my hand. I had spent 6 years in the ICU learning to read the difference between the fear of losing someone and the fear of being found out. They are not the same expression. "Hi, Dad," I said. I watched him carefully. He believed the performance was working. He was not yet wrong. 2 days later, Pat closed my room door and pulled her chair close. She had been doing this, appearing in quiet windows between my father's visits, checking my pain levels, adjusting my position, doing the small necessary work of nursing with the specific attention of someone who was also watching. "Just say it," I told her. She said it, all of it. The billing department, the DNR. The exact words he had used. "She's been a financial drain her whole life." The steady signature, the exit through the front door, the fact that he had never looked toward my room. The monitor beeped steadily beside me as she spoke. I counted 3 beeps before I answered. "He signed a DNR on me?" "Yes." "Is it documented?" "Incident report, time-stamped." The surgeon gave a full account. I looked at the ceiling for a long moment. Not from shock. That is the wrong word for what I felt. The shock would have required the information to feel new. It did not feel new. It felt like confirmation of something I had been carrying so long I had stopped examining it. The quiet, persistent sense that in my father's accounting of the world, I was a liability he had never fully reconciled. "How am I alive?" "I found your proxy. Deborah drove through the night." I closed my eyes. Then I said, "Get me my phone. I want to tell you about the church before I tell you what happened there." First Grace Community sits on a quiet road west of Philadelphia. Red brick, white steeple, a parking lot that fills by 9:45 every Sunday morning. Approximately 120 members attend each week. Families, retirees, small business owners, the kind of congregation where people know your children's birthdays and what casserole you bring to potluck. My father had been a deacon there for 15 years. He read scripture from the lectern. He organized fundraising drives. He fixed furnaces for elderly members without charging labor. Pastor David spoke of him from the pulpit as a man of faith and sacrifice, a phrase my father never corrected, which required its own kind of discipline. He always spoke at the monthly community gathering. He always spoke about family. Kesler had come to the hospital the morning after my conversation with Pat. He looked almost exactly as I had imagined from his voice. Gray suit pressed, but worn at the elbows, silver-rimmed glasses, a leather briefcase softened by years of use. He carried himself with the quiet steadiness of someone accustomed to sitting still while storms moved around him. He set the manila envelope on the bed beside me. My name was written across the front in my grandmother's handwriting. Just Wendy, nothing else. I broke the seal slowly. Wendy, I know your father will try to take everything. He already has over the years, my pension, my savings, things I never told you because I was afraid of breaking the family apart. That was my mistake. Don't make it yours. The house is yours. The money is yours. Mr. Kesler has all the paperwork. Don't let anyone take what belongs to you, not even your father. Especially your father. You are stronger than I ever was, sweetheart. I see it in you. I always have. I'm sorry I didn't say this while I could still hold your hand. I love you. Grandma Lillian, I did not cry immediately. What arrived first was something quieter than tears, the specific recognition of someone who has been seen. Not by the people who were supposed to see her. By someone who had watched from a distance, understood what she was watching, and spent her final years building something that would still be standing after she was gone. The tears came later. Not from grief, from relief. The relief of a person who has been carrying a story alone for a very long time and has just discovered that someone else witnessed it and believed her. Kesler waited until I folded the letter carefully. Then he set the documentation beside me. The original will, the probate confirmation, the recorded deed in my name, the lien search showing my father's mortgage. The deed was transferred out of your name 3 weeks ago, he said. Using a power of attorney, your signature appears on the form. I never signed one. No, I hold the original deed from probate. No POA was ever authorized through my office. So it's forged. Yes, he continued. A mortgage of $280,000 had been recorded against the property, approved within days of the transfer. I reached for a pen from the bedside table. My hand did not shake. I wrote down every detail, dates, lien holder, notary number, the name Carl, the favor owed. Do you want to press charges? Kesler asked. Not yet, I said. I want to understand how deep this goes. I looked at the wall clock above the door. Tuesday. The community gathering was Sunday. 5 days. I want it done correctly, I said. Legally. And publicly. My father visited again that Thursday, carrying yellow roses and banana bread Meredith had baked. He kissed my forehead, sat beside me, played the role with the fluency of someone who had been playing roles for a long time. Pause. Don't worry about the bills, he said warmly. We'll handle everything as a family. As a family. The man who had signed a paper to let me die was now promising protection. Thank you, Dad, I said. He squeezed my hand and left. At the door he turned and smiled. I returned the smile. Saturday evening, he called. By the way, he said, casual as a weather report, your grandmother's house, I've been handling the estate matters. Don't worry about it, I'll explain when you're stronger. He was testing the perimeter, checking whether I knew. Thank you for taking care of it, Dad, I replied softly. He sounded relieved. He believed everything was still contained. Sunday morning I dressed simply. White button-down, black slacks. The small silver studs my grandmother had given me on my 21st birthday. No makeup, no theatrics, just truth inside a manila folder. Deborah drove. Kesler was waiting near the entrance when we arrived. He gave me a single nod. Inside, the service was finishing. My father sat in the front row. He turned, saw me, smiled broadly, raised his hand. I returned a small wave. The congregation moved into the fellowship hall. Folding tables, fluorescent lighting, coffee and baked ziti, the particular warmth of a room full of people who have known each other a long time. My father stood near the microphone. He tapped it twice. Good afternoon, everyone. The room quieted. As many of you know, my youngest daughter, Wendy, was in a terrible accident last month. She was in a coma for 3 weeks. The doctors weren't sure she would make it. A perfectly timed pause. But God is faithful, and today Wendy is here. Applause erupted, warm, genuine, the sound of a community that believed what it was hearing. As a father, there is nothing more terrifying than almost losing your child. I prayed every single night. I never left her side. There it was. I never left her side. He gestured toward me. An invitation. I walked forward. "Dad," I said clearly, "may I say something?" He couldn't refuse. "Of course, sweetheart." He handed me the microphone. His smile was wide, confident. The smile of a man who believed the architecture of the situation was still his. I looked at the room. 120 faces. People who had known my father for 15 years. People who had trusted him with their fundraising and their furnaces and their faith. "Thank you for your prayers," I said. "I am grateful to be standing here, but I need to correct something my father just said." Silence. "He did not pray by my bedside. He came to this hospital once. He went to the billing department first." Murmurs. "He asked how much my surgery would cost. And when they told him, he said, and this is documented in a hospital incident report, 'Let her go. We won't pay for the surgery. She's been a financial drain her whole life.'" The air in the room changed. Not noisy, heavy. The specific weight of a community encountering information that requires it to revise something it believed was settled. He signed a do not resuscitate order. A woman covered her mouth. Someone inhaled sharply. "I am alive because a nurse found my healthcare proxy and called my friend, who drove 90 minutes through rain to authorize my surgery. That friend is here today." I did not look at Deborah. I kept my eyes on the room. My father stepped forward. "Wendy, stop. I'm not done. This isn't the place. You chose a church to lie. I chose the same church for the truth." The side door opened. Kesler entered. Calm, measured. He stood beside me and opened his briefcase. "My grandmother left me her house and her savings. The will was probated 5 months ago. While I was in a coma, my father forged my signature on a power of attorney. He transferred the house into his name. He took out a $280,000 mortgage against it." A dish clattered somewhere in the back of the room. "That's a lie," my father said. Kesler held up the original will, notarized, clearly dated, my name as sole beneficiary. My father looked around the room for the support he expected to find. No one moved. I lowered the microphone slightly. "I'm not here to humiliate you," I said. "I'm here because you tried to let me die, and when that didn't work, you stole from me." His face had gone the color of old paper. "The deed transfer has been challenged in court. The mortgage lender has been notified. A police report has been filed." His hand was trembling. "You would send your own father to prison," he whispered. "You signed a paper to let your own daughter die." Silence. Total. Then Pastor David spoke, quietly, without drama, the way a person speaks when they have heard enough to understand a situation completely. "Gerald, I think you should leave." My father scanned the room one final time. The faces that had trusted him for 15 years looked back without flinching. He sat briefly on the edge of a folding table. Then he stood. Walked to the door. At the threshold he turned. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. He left. For several seconds after the door closed, no one moved. It was the strangest quiet I had ever been inside, not confusion, not discomfort, but the specific stillness that follows the collapse of something people had believed was permanent. Then the room exhaled. A chair scraped softly. Someone set down a coffee cup with careful hands. Cautious, stunned life returning to the space. "I'm sorry for disrupting your Sunday," I said quietly. "My grandmother loved this church. She would have wanted the truth spoken here." 2 women approached first. One hugged me without speaking. The other held my hand so tightly it almost hurt. Then a small, weathered hand touched my arm. I turned to find an elderly woman with white hair and glasses on a chain. "I'm Doris Brennan," she said. "Your grandmother and I sat together every Sunday for 20 years. She talked about you constantly," Doris continued. "She was so proud of you." I stood in that fellowship hall surrounded by the voices of people who had just witnessed something difficult. And I understood something my grandmother had understood about me years before I understood it myself. She had not left me money and property because she thought I needed saving. She had left them because she knew I had been saving myself for years without the tools to do it properly. She had given me the tools. The dismantling was not dramatic. This is the thing that surprises people when I describe it. They expect the aftermath to match the revelation in scale and noise, and it did not. It was paperwork, phone calls, a process server on a Tuesday afternoon. The specific, unglamorous mechanics of legal consequence finding their way to the correct address. Monday morning, the bank froze the mortgage. The title was flagged as disputed. The loan was suspended. The money my father had already spent was now his personal debt, unsecured and without remedy. By Monday afternoon, the police had opened a formal investigation into forgery and mortgage fraud. Carl, the notary, hired his own attorney by Tuesday and began cooperating fully. He had stamped a document he should have questioned. He understood the difference between a witness to a signature and an accessory to a forgery, and he moved accordingly. Pat called me on Tuesday evening. "How are you?" she asked. "Slowly better," I said. "Good." A pause. "Your father called the floor today, asked to speak to me directly." "What did he say?" "He wanted to know if there was any way the incident report could be reviewed." "Amended?" "What did you say?" I told him the report was accurate and had already been submitted to the hospital's legal department. Another pause. He hung up. I sat for a moment. "Thank you, Pat," I said. "For all of it." She was quiet for a moment, the specific quiet of someone who does not take credit for doing what was right. "Welcome back, Thomas," she said. 3 days later, Kesler called with another discovery. 3 years earlier, my father had changed the beneficiary on my life insurance policy. From Deborah to himself. My signature appeared on the form. I had never signed it. I sat with this for a long time in Deborah's kitchen, at the table where we had been going over documents for 2 weeks, while the evening settled around us. Deborah poured tea and sat across from me and did not fill the silence. He had not just been willing to let me die. He had prepared to profit from it. Every version of my future he had been imagining for 3 weeks had ended without me in it, and he had arranged things accordingly. I picked up my pen and added the life insurance policy to the documentation folder. Meredith called on a Saturday afternoon. I was sitting on Deborah's couch with a heating pad across my ribs, which still protested certain movements with the specific insistence of healing bones that had not yet finished their work. Her name glowed on my phone screen. I let it ring twice. "I need to tell you something," she said when I answered. "Then tell me." A long inhale. "I knew about the DNR. The room became very quiet. I was in the waiting room when Dad spoke to the doctor. He told me what he was planning to do. I didn't stop him." I did not say anything. "And the house," she said. "I knew about that too. He promised me $85,000 if I kept quiet." The number landed with a specific weight, not because of what it was, because $85,000 was exactly what my grandmother had left me in the trust. He had not just stolen from me. He had tried to divide the theft between his 2 daughters, to make Meredith complicit, to spread the silence, to ensure that if anything unraveled, he would not unravel alone. "And you agreed," I said quietly. "Yes, while I was in a coma." "Yes." She began to cry, the specific sound of crying that is not performed, that arrives despite rather than for an audience. Pause. "I was scared of him, Wendy. I've always been scared of him." "I know," I said. "I know that's not an excuse." "No," I said, "it isn't." A long silence. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said. "I know I don't deserve it." "Not right now," I said. "You're right about that." Her breath hitched. "But I'm not pretending you don't exist. If you want to rebuild something with me, not with his money, not with his choices between us, you know where to find me." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something I had not expected. "Grandma sent me a letter, too." I sat upright despite my ribs. She wrote, "I love you, Meredith, but you are too much like your father. Choose differently." The line was quiet. "Did you?" I asked softly. "Choose differently?" She did not answer immediately, because we both already knew the answer had not been decided yet. 1 month later, the court voided the fraudulent deed. Kesler called at 10 in the morning. "Thank your grandmother," he said. Then, before he hung up, "She would have loved watching you in that fellowship hall." I believed him. My father accepted a plea deal. Forgery in the 3rd degree, mortgage fraud, full restitution, probation. No prison, provided he cooperated completely. It was not mercy. It was mathematics. The evidence was overwhelming, and Carl had already given investigators everything they needed. To cover part of the debt, my father sold his house. It still was not enough. The remainder would follow him for years, a financial obligation that could not be refinanced or outrun, a shadow that was proportionate to what he had done. He moved in with his brother in Allentown eventually. I heard this through relatives. I did not confirm it. Some distances are healthier when left unmeasured. I returned to work in May. Pat adjusted my rotation to day shifts without making a speech about it. She handed me the schedule and said, "Welcome back, Thomas." I put on my badge and walked the floor, and the work was exactly as I had left it, demanding and specific and necessary in the way that work is when it involves keeping people alive. It felt like coming back to myself. On a crisp Saturday in October, I drove to Norristown. Elm Street looked exactly as it always had, maple trees arching overhead, the sidewalks cracked by roots that refused containment, the particular quiet of a residential street on a Saturday morning when the neighborhood has not yet fully decided to be awake. I walked up the path to the brick house. My house. The key turned smoothly. Lavender greeted me first, sachets tucked into drawers exactly where my grandmother had always kept them. The air held the smell of that specific domestic care that accumulates over decades, the smell of a house that has been loved steadily and without fanfare. Her photograph rested on the mantel, the two of us squinting into sunlight on the porch swing, probably a Tuesday afternoon from 4 summers ago, both of us looking slightly away from the camera at something just outside the frame. I sat in her rocking chair. I did not turn on the television. I did not check my phone. I sat in the quiet of a room that was mine, not earned through endurance, not granted conditionally, not assigned in response to someone else's need for management. Given through love, plainly and in advance, by a woman who had understood what I needed before I had the language for it. The afternoon light moved across the floor in the slow way of October light, which is unhurried because it understands it is running out. Outside, the maple trees were doing what they do in October, releasing what they no longer needed, trusting that what remained was enough to survive the winter and begin again in spring. I sat in my grandmother's rocking chair and let the house be quiet around me. My ribs had mostly stopped hurting. The surgical scar across my sternum, the one from the operation when I was 4, the one my father had turned into a ledger entry, was the same scar it had always been. Pale and smooth, the record of a body that had been opened and repaired and had gone on living. I pressed my hand against it for a moment, not from grief, not from anger, from recognition. I had always known how to endure. What I had needed to learn was that endurance and surrender are not the same thing, and that knowing the difference is not a lesson anyone can teach you. It arrives on its own terms, in its own time, usually through something you did not choose. I had not chosen the accident. I had not chosen my father. I had not chosen the 3 weeks of unconsciousness during which the architecture of my life was being dismantled and rebuilt without my knowledge. But I had chosen every decision I made after I opened my eyes. The rocking chair moved gently. Just the small motion of a body at rest, back and forth, the wooden runners on the old floor making the specific sound of something that has been doing this for a long time and intends to continue. From the garden, a bird. From somewhere on the street, a child's voice, distant and cheerful. The October afternoon continued its unhurried work. I stayed in the chair until the light changed. Then I stood, turned the kettle on in my grandmother's kitchen, and made tea the way she had taught me, loose leaf, steeped long, a small amount of honey. I carried the cup to the porch. I sat on the swing. It creaked when I settled into it. The same creak it had always made whenever the weight shifted, whenever someone arrived or departed, whenever the wind changed direction and the wood acknowledged the change. I wrapped both hands around the warm cup. I looked at the street. This was the thing my grandmother had understood and tried to tell me in the only language available to her at 84, when her voice was thin and the time was short and she could not be certain I would receive the message clearly. She had said it in a letter, in a house, in a lawyer named Kesler who answered his phone on a Tuesday afternoon when a woman he had never met called him from a hospital bed. She had said, "You deserve to take up space in your own life. Not through triumph, not through revenge, just through the ordinary, radical act of being present in a place that belongs to you." The swing moved gently. The street was quiet. I drank my tea.